Hi, I'm Jeff Hughes with CA Technologies, and welcome to this episode of the Continuous Testing Academy. Today we're going to talk about continuous testing with test data management. So the first question is, what is achieving continuous testing? Basically, it is the practice of testing across every aspect of the software development lifecycle to uncover and fix unexpected errors and bugs as soon as they are injected into the system. And so it's this idea of moving the whole testing process earlier in the development stage. So rather than developing code and waiting till the end of development to test, we're now introducing testing at multiple stages within the development life cycle. So there are some challenges to continuous testing. What are they? So in this slide here, basically we see that there are requirements challenges. For example, 64% of total defects originate in the requirements and analysis phase. So very early on in development, requirements can be a problem for continuous testing. There's development stages where 50% of developers' time is spent fixing and finding defects. So again, lots of time wasted there. QA and testing, big bottleneck. Testers spend 70% of their time testing code and doing testing that is manual. In other words, developing data, test data that is done manually. So big delay there. Release is also an area where there's a bottleneck in terms of the release development lifecycle. And then operations, production outages, and so on. So we have all these different phases within the software development lifecycle where there can be various bottlenecks to achieving continuous testing. So there are some elements if you want to improve continuous testing, and they're shown here in this diagram. You need to automatically generate test automation scripts from requirements. So you have to have tools that can do that. Simulate the test environments using service virtualization type of tools. And number 3 here is access test data on demand and PII data, or personally identifiable information, for compliance. This is really where we want to focus our discussion today, is talking about number 3. How do you get your hands on the right test data? And so we introduced this concept of test data management. There are some challenges within test data management, and this is where we want to focus our conversation today. First of all, the tester oftentimes has a problem finding the right test data. So that's challenge number 1. They also have a problem protecting test data. So they found production data. Is it sensitive data? What are they going to do with the data? How do they safeguard that data in a testing environment? Number 3 is improving test data. So oftentimes testers have a problem finding the right data, or maybe they can't find all of the data that they need for testing. And so there's a delay there in testing the applications. And number 4 is delivering test data to the testers that need it the most. So these really are the 4 key areas or challenges with test data management. So traditional test data management approaches, a lot of companies, even today and in the past, approach test data management in this regard. They have some production data, they go and they subset that data into smaller quantities, and then they mask that data for their particular use. Now, masking is basically altering the data for testing purposes. So they'll change a first name and a last name, they'll change a social security number, a credit card, and so on. So test data really is a significant part of a tester's time when they're trying to gather this information. This is the traditional approach. Gather production data, subset, and mask it. The problem with that is that it's error prone. Sometimes 20% to 30% coverage is all you're going to get by doing this type of approach. Oftentimes it lacks negative test scenarios, so the ability to test for certain outliers, negative numbers, or large entries into the application, all can cause that application to fail. But if you don't have that right test data, you're not going to be able to test effectively. And so the result is you have errors, you have bugs in applications, and so on. So the newer approach to test data management really is to take production data and locate that data across many environments and then visualize the data, being able to visualize that data and analyze the data quality. So first you can find existing data, analyze the data quality, and then if needed, you can generate the missing data that you need for that particular test. And so there is this concept of being able to use test data on demand. It's basically giving the testers the test data when they need it, whenever they need it, and wherever they need it. And so that's really the evolution of test data management. So companies that have the right tools to do that can profile, they can subset and mask data like they've done before, but now they can generate data synthetically, which means they can basically build the data from scratch and not have to either use production data, or they can fill in the gaps of the missing data that they have. And they can deliver it virtually if they need to every single tester, which means that every tester can get a copy of their own set of test data for their particular testing needs. And so you see that there's an evolution with test data management solutions, moving beyond just subsetting and masking of that test data. So where does test data management fit in the continuous testing ecosystem? So in this diagram here, you can see that the testing process really is a continuous loop, okay? So small portions of code are generated, then they're tested, and requirements are defined, and then test data is generated for those requirements. And then the whole process continues to repeat itself. When an application is updated, then new requirements are defined and new tests can be defined from that automatically from the requirements that have been generated. So in terms of the ecosystem, test data management plays a very critical role within this whole system of testing. So you generate test cases, they need test data. You're doing other types of testing of applications, maybe it's a regression type of testing, you're going to need some test data. So really all roads lead back to test data management whenever you're testing your various applications, be it new applications or legacy applications. So who are the players in the test data management scenario? These are the folks at each company that typically are going to be involved in test data management. So you have the traditional tester. They're the ones that consume the data that you provide. They are the ones that have a need for certain types of test data. Either you find that test data through production environments, or you generate that test data for their particular needs. You also have somebody that manages these test data services. So this is the person that gathers up the test data or defines the requirements, the test data needs, and so on. And they really then go to the operations person, that's probably a database administrator, that is looking for ways to provide that data to the tester and the test data engineer. So these really are the three key players. I should also add that there's oftentimes a compliance officer that might be involved in this scenario, because they are concerned about how your test data is being used, or excuse me, how your production data is being used in test data management scenarios. So these three players are pivotal to your organization in terms of defining a test data management solution. So in summary, I just want to talk a little bit about test data management with continuous testing. Continuous testing is this concept of testing all the time. So not waiting till the end of development to test, but testing in smaller increments as each part of that application is developed. We run it through its paces and test it. And so test data management is pivotal to the operation of successfully having a continuous testing system in place at your company. I want to conclude by summarizing the key values and benefits of a test data management solution. So having test data management solution in place is going to allow you to speed up the generation of test data. It's going to allow you to locate and build test data much more quickly than you will through manual approaches. So that could either be through synthetic data generation or through virtual delivery of test data. Test data management really is key to achieving continuous testing. So I want to encourage you to take a look at the solutions that are out there for test data management. It's going to help your testing teams achieve continuous testing and achieve continuous delivery. Thank you for joining me today on this video.